Imagine walking into the bank where you've trusted your money for years, only to be humiliated and denied basic service. That's exactly what happened to a black CEO who was simply trying to make a withdrawal from her own account. But what transpired next will shock you. After being treated unfairly by a bank manager, she didn't just walk away frustrated, she took action. 7 minutes later, that same manager was out of a job. How did a routine transaction turn into a dramatic confrontation? Why was she denied service in the first place? The story behind this moment is filled with layers of tension, power dynamics, and ultimately, a bold decision that shook up the whole bank. The CEO didn't let the injustice slide. She confronted the situation head-on, and in just moments, the balance of power shifted completely. In the next part of the story, we'll dive into the shocking details of the confrontation, the manager's reaction, and the incredible move the CEO made that left everyone speechless. But what happened after she fired the manager? Was there any fallout? Stay tuned for the rest of this jaw-dropping tale. To understand what led up to that fateful moment, we need to go back a few steps. The CEO in question was no stranger to high-pressure situations. Running a successful business, she had built her career from the ground up, overcoming countless obstacles in the corporate world. But this was different. This wasn't about a boardroom meeting or making big deals. This was personal. She had been banking at the same institution for years, a place where she had built trust and loyalty. So when she walked into the branch that afternoon to make a simple withdrawal, she never expected to be met with such resistance. The bank manager, a man she had never encountered before, seemed to question her identity, despite her providing all the necessary documents. His dismissive attitude was hard to ignore, but what really raised alarms was his refusal to process her request. It wasn't just a mistake or misunderstanding, it felt deliberate. As the minutes ticked by, the situation grew more tense. Other customers looked on, some whispering, others frozen in disbelief. The CEO's frustration boiled over, but she kept her composure. Little did the manager know, she was no stranger to handling unfair situations, and this was no exception. What he didn't realize was that the CEO had been preparing for a moment like this, knowing that sometimes standing up for yourself meant making decisions that would shake up the system. As the CEO stood there, her eyes never left the bank manager. She could feel the stares of the other customers, some sympathizing with her, others unsure of what was unfolding. The manager, though, didn't seem to care about the growing tension around them. He was focused on his paperwork, his expression cold and unbothered, as if he had all the power in the room. But it wasn't just the denial of service that bothered her. It was the underlying assumption that she didn't belong in that space. She knew the subtle biases that could surface in places like this, even in an industry that was supposed to be professional and fair. As a black woman in a position of power, she'd have faced challenges throughout her career, but this felt different. It wasn't just about her being denied a simple transaction. It was about the deep-rooted prejudices that still lurked behind closed doors. Her mind raced, replaying every interaction she had had with this bank, the countless deposits she had made, the trust she had placed in them. Now that trust felt like it was being torn apart. She wondered if this was just a coincidence, or if the manager had targeted her because of something deeper, something she hadn't yet seen. Meanwhile, the manager seemed increasingly irritated as time passed. He tried to remain calm, but there was an underlying frustration in his tone. He spoke as though he was doing her a favor, as if he could deny her rights at any moment. This attitude fueled her resolve. She had been in tough situations before, but never had she felt so openly disrespected. As her patience wore thin, the tension between them grew more palpable. The clock was ticking. The pressure was mounting. The question was, how far would she go to make sure her voice was heard, to make sure her integrity wasn't trampled on? The CEO could feel her heart racing. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter, but she knew this moment wasn't about losing control. It was about standing her ground, even when everything around her seemed to be stacked against her. The manager continued to fumble with his papers, glancing at her only occasionally, his demeanor growing more dismissive by the second. She wondered how many other people had been treated like this, how many others had walked out of this bank feeling just as small, just as powerless. With every second that ticked by, the humiliation burned more. She had done everything right, produced her ID, filled out the withdrawal slip. But the manager kept finding new excuses. His voice grew more patronizing, almost mocking, as if he couldn't believe she was challenging his authority. In the back of her mind, she wondered if he was testing her, if he believed that someone like her wouldn't have the nerve to call him out on his behavior. But she wasn't going to let this slide. Not today. Not after everything she had fought for. This wasn't just about the money. This was about dignity. This was about making sure that no one would walk all over her or anyone else again. Finally, the manager slid her paperwork back to her with a cold, final gesture, his eyes narrowing. He had reached the point of no return, and so had she. A tense silence filled the air, as if everyone in the room was holding their breath. The other customers were still watching, unsure of what was about to unfold. It felt like the world had slowed down. This was the moment of truth. With calm precision, the CEO stepped forward, her gaze locking with the manager's. The decision was made. The tension in the room was so thick, you could almost feel it pressing down on everyone. She didn't flinch, not once. And in that brief, electric moment, the balance of power would shift. But would the manager see it coming? Just as the CEO moved forward, ready to confront the manager, something unexpected happened. A quiet voice interrupted the growing silence. An unfamiliar woman approached from behind the counter. The CEO's eyes flickered toward her, a new layer of confusion settling in. The woman was wearing a different uniform, one that signaled she wasn't just another teller or clerk. This was someone higher up in the hierarchy. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience," the woman said, her tone overly sweet, but with a touch of forced urgency. "Is there something I can help with?" Her eyes darted between the CEO and the manager, who, to the CEO's surprise, looked visibly rattled now, his earlier arrogance beginning to crack. The manager stammered, trying to explain the situation, but the new woman cut him off, flashing a quick, calculated smile at the CEO. "Let's take this to my office," she said, gesturing toward the back of the branch. The CEO hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation not lost on her. Was this a quick attempt to cover up the manager's behavior, or was it another layer of the game being played behind the scenes? As they walked toward the office, the tension in the air thickened. The CEO's mind raced. She had no idea what was happening next, but she knew that the stakes had just gotten higher. The manager was no longer the only one to blame. This woman, whoever she was, had just thrown a wrench into everything. The door to the office closed behind them, and suddenly, the room felt even smaller. The CEO sat down, fully aware that the power dynamic was shifting yet again. What was the real story here? What was this woman's role in all of this? And more importantly, what was going to happen now that things had escalated beyond just a confrontation with one manager? The CEO sat in the small office. The new woman took a seat across from her, folding her hands on the desk. The manager remained standing by the door, still unnervingly quiet. The atmosphere was charged, the silence stretching uncomfortably before the woman finally spoke. "I'm very sorry you had to experience this," she began, her voice softer now, though still carrying a hint of formality. "But I assure you, this situation is being handled." The CEO leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the woman. "Handled? By who exactly? Because I can't shake the feeling this wasn't just a mistake on his part." The woman glanced at the manager, who shifted uneasily, his hands twitching by his sides. "There are some things that need to be cleared up," the woman replied, her words measured, almost rehearsed. "You see, there's a history here, and not everyone is aware of it." The CEO's heart skipped a beat. What history? Before the woman could respond, the door swung open. Another figure entered, the CEO's own personal financial advisor. His arrival was unexpected, but not entirely out of place. His presence, however, raised immediate questions. "I believe we need to have a full conversation about what's been going on," the advisor said, glancing between the CEO and the woman. "It's time we all knew the truth." The CEO's mind raced. The twist was unfolding in real time, and she could feel her pulse quicken. The advisor, someone she trusted implicitly, had known more than he had ever let on. This wasn't just a case of poor service, it was a deliberate setup. Her advisor had been planning something behind her back, orchestrating this entire encounter. Before she could ask him anything, the woman across from her spoke again, her expression now a mix of sympathy and regret. "This isn't just about what happened today. It's about a series of actions that led to this, actions that were meant to test your limits. You see, the bank's been under pressure to reach a certain demographic, and you were chosen, but not for the reasons you think." The CEO's stomach dropped as the full weight of the conspiracy hit her. She had been targeted, not because of a random mistake, but because of her position. She was a symbol in a larger game, one that had been carefully crafted to manipulate her. The manager's behavior had been just the beginning. Everything had been designed to see how she would react, how much control she had in this situation. But just as the realization settled in, a sharp ring broke the tension. The woman's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it before looking up. "We have a new development," she said quietly. "The situation's bigger than any of us anticipated." The door opened again, and this time, a security officer stepped in, holding a sealed envelope. The woman took it without a word, tore it open, and then slowly slid the contents across the desk. The CEO's eyes widened as she looked at the papers. Inside was a list of transactions, emails, and key figures. The final twist was beyond anything she had expected. The person pulling the strings wasn't even in the bank. It was someone from her own company, someone in her inner circle who had been leaking information for months. The stakes had just escalated beyond her wildest imagination. The manager, the bank, the advisor, it was all part of a much larger scheme. And now she had a choice to make. Would she expose everything, or was there something even deeper lurking, waiting to be uncovered?